on Neighbor's Choice is live, and I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be back with you live in our neighborhood here in sunny Central Florida, where the problems we have, they're not that hard to solve. We've got to roll up our sleeves and solve them ourselves. We cannot rely on the lame nonsense that continues to be peddled out of D.C., the same failed pseudoscience that the federal government has been using to try to manage our lives for us. All of that stuff has done nothing good for us except provide a great example of what not to do to build a flourishing society in a healthy life, healthy mind, healthy body. All those things, you're not going to find that in D.C. You know, I just heard the news, the ABC News, before we arrived on this broadcast. And ABC is a good, reliable organ for state information. And that means big, giant corporations that own the state, they get to disseminate narratives that are going unquestioned by the official state media organs. That's their job, to not question the powerful, but to question the powerless. If the powerless say, hey, I don't know if I want to take something that has legal immunity. Oh, don't ask a question. You are powerless. We are owned by giant corporations. They're the ones that stack and staff our bureaucracies in the state. They're the ones that pick the commissioners. Why is it, if what in the world does science have to do with the fact that the FDA is always staffed by the top pharmaceutical executives? You know, think about that for a second. How dumb is that, right? That's a scientifically driven organization, but it just so happens that all of the true stakeholders who make the decisions are always in a revolving door relationship with the top giant corporations that manufacture drugs. Why is that? You know, does it take a lot of intelligence to think about that question, or are we supposed to just surrender our brains completely to the boob tube of television groupthink? Why? You know, the scientific method is about being able to pursue the facts and the evidence and to test it and to have controls and to have the most objective standards possible to determine whether you're on the right track or not. And you certainly don't get that with an FDA or a CDC when all of the people that run these bureaucracies at the top are always in a revolving door relationship with the top giant medical companies in the entire world. That has nothing to do. With the pursuit of truth and scientific inquiry. Nothing. Has nothing to do with it. And instead, what we find ourselves is a political organization, unfortunately. A politicized organization. A pay-to-play organization. And I'm not saying that is a direct payment. I'm saying the industry leaders of pharmaceutical companies, they don't have to make a direct payment. They are the oxygen of the FDA. They are the oxygen of the CDC. They live and breathe those corporations' interests. That's what they're there for. And it only takes just a little modicum of wisdom and discernment to understand this. I just heard again in the ABC newscast before we began this broadcast on live radio, where they say, oh, you know, London, you know, England's still in a lockdown, more months to go, but the COVID is escalating. Well, no. Well, I wonder why. You know, none of those guys in London would tell their audience, hey, it's time to stop eating the soybean oil, the canola oil. That's the thing that's associated with the comorbidities and the elderly that makes this kind of virus a potentially dangerous experience. They don't tell you that. So they're not doing scientific information. They're doing save their tails, make themselves look good narratives. They're doing stuff that makes them look good, makes them look like gods, and they love telling people what to do. You look at deranged HOAs. Everybody I meet, I talk to, I hear many things, and one of the most overwhelming agreed thing is how insane so many HOAs are. That they will attack you, that they will harass you for a blade of grass being a half a millimeter higher than it should be. That they're just incessant. Some HOLs, not all of them. I'm just saying in general, that's a common thing. Is you'll hear a lot of people say how much viciousness, ruthlessness, a lot of these people who are unemployed or whatever, who have all the time in the world to attack and harass their neighbors for everything imaginable because of some rule. And it just gives them purpose. Some people like rules. And look, we love rules, but we want rules that are based on reality. And with an HOA, yes, it is voluntary, so that's something that's a legitimate rule, but you have to wonder about the kind of mind that is so obsessed with viciously pursuing and policing their neighbors like faceless blobs of meat that they don't care at all about the humanity of what they're doing. That they will fine and threaten and attack or what have you for the most minuscule, insane, stupid violations that, again, it's just like some kind of robotic obsession with, well, it says here, you cannot have, and the most minuscule little thing that you could possibly imagine, hang a wreath for Christmas on your door or something. That's the kind of stuff that you have to say, what is wrong with a certain percentage of humanity that wants to be such mindless, rule-keeping, gatekeeping, hatefulness, that nothing seems to register about the things that they're doing. Nothing seems to register. Nothing seems to connect. And then you multiply that times 1,000,000 for government bureaucrats. And you have to wonder, it's amazing that it's not worse than it is. Because if you give government bureaucrats like Boris Johnson the power to tell you to sit at home for months on end, he won't tell you to take care of your body so that when you have this virus, you can fight it off with ease like the vast majority of people who get it. No. They don't want to equip you with freedom of your own body by getting you to stop eating the toxins that governments are subsidizing at your expense and then destroying your body's health by getting you to eat these cheap foods that are only cheap because they stole your money to subsidize the people that made it. No, they don't want to do that. That would be logical. That would be human. That would be lovely. That would be decent. That would be normal. That would be not psychopathic. But that's not what government does. So why would you expect anything less when government bureaucrats tell you, stay in the house, we're going to have a lockdown. Oh, the lockdown's supposed to be working. You look at North Dakota versus South Dakota. One did heavy-handed measures more. One did hands-off more. Same graph. Same numbers of infections and disease and so forth. There's no evidence of these stupid mass mandates, these stupid, idiotic lockdowns where you need to be out in the sun, that most of these cases, you never see hardly any of them get transmitted in open air environments. There's no science at all for that. They don't tell you any of the science about vitamin D and the essential need for vitamin D. They don't tell you that the cold and flu season is correlated to the times of the year in which a lot of people don't have access to a lot of sunshine. That's what dictates the cold and flu season ebb cycle. The ebb and flow of the cycle. They don't tell you any of that. No, all they do is they tell you, I control you. I God. I smart. I tell you what do. And then a lot of people say, oh, you God? Okay, I follow you. Boris Johnson. Genius. What do you want me to do? keep eating the mayonnaise, keep eating your fish and chips fried in toxic trash that was subsidized at your expense like an idiot. I'm sorry, but this is the reality of what these people in London have to deal with. Sick. In New York City, these hive mind cesspools of idiotic ideas just baked in on top of each other. Just crowded in together, eating that soybean oil, that mayonnaise, just smearing it on their fish and chips, and it's sad, that nobody tells them, you don't have to eat that kind of trash. You don't have to eat that trash. You don't have to listen to stupid Luddites like Boris Johnson tell you to sit in the house, get no vitamin D, even though they don't get a lot of vitamin D over there anyways. Maybe that's the reason why they're always having these problems of illness. One of the reasons. But they're also, they're taking their fish and chips, they're frying them in batter that's got canola oil or soybean oil or all these toxic garbage seed oils. The average American eats 5 to 10 tablespoons of seed oils a day. 96 ears of corn is what it takes to make 5 tablespoons of corn oil. That gives you a perspective of how unnatural these foods are, and the bozo idiots like Boris Johnson won't tell you, hey, lay off the fish and chips, my friend. Could you please stop eating the fish and chips for a few days, please? Now that we have you locked in the home for a little bit, can you please get off the mayonnaise? No, they don't tell you that because they're a bunch of stupid Luddite cowards. Don't listen to these fools. What do they know about health? They're losers. They are losers because to have that kind of power over low information people and do nothing to help people get their bodies and get their health and get their mind in order is the height of pathetic, loser, idiotic scum to do that to people. To have that kind of power and do nothing, you've got to be the dumbest idiot or just a stupid, paid-off, PR-owned little muppet for giant corporations. And I'm sick and tired of people being bullied by these losers. I don't care whether you're left or right, if you're worshiping a state that has lost its moral authority on so many aspects of all of the places that they try to have a monopoly of information about. If you're still pushing that old-time religion of state worship, that is a losing game. It's a losing proposition. And don't mind me as I continue to help many people leave that false paradigm and embrace their own health and their own freedom. I'm David Gornosky. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. Drop us a comment on our YouTube stream. Search for David Gornosky on YouTube or Facebook. Search for David Gornosky there. Drop us a comment there. 727-587-1040 is the number to call. 727-587-1040. Number to call if you want to chime in on a thought. We'll be back after this short break. David Gornosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski. We are live broadcasting worldwide on podcast, video stream, and radio. And we're going to continue to spread across the country on radio, wherever we can go, wherever we can spread this message. This is a movement. People say, should you call it the David Gronowski Show? And they don't understand. It's not about a David Gronowski show. It's about a movement. It's about a message. It's about thinking in a different way. It's bigger than just one person. It will outlast what we do on A Neighbor's Choice will outlast me. It's not about what does this person have to say. It's about how electrifying it is to know that we do not have to stay in bondage to toxic groupthink and toxic sludge food. That we can redeem and reclaim our life. We can reclaim our health and our sovereignty and our dignity. We don't have to be stuck in this low resolution place where we are told by fools with no track record of excellence how to live our lives. And they want us to live in fear and dependency. They want us to live in fear and dependency. Always got to be scared about somebody around the world's going to get you. So that's why they spend $1 trillion of your money on fat cats for foreign policy. Always got to be scared about some virus. And they were trying all these things. Oh, remember this one? They said, oh, it's this one. It's this one. It's this one. They are always trying to scare you. And they finally got one that really fit the bill. They finally got one, and they still won't tell us the truth about how it unleashed itself in China. They still want to scapegoat some pangolin, some wet market, because they're bigots. They don't care about the truth. They care about protecting their own selves and being little gods. People who love to have power over other people, they're concerned with only one thing: maintaining that power at all costs. It's a sad, pathetic little religion, statism. It's pathetic. It stinks. It's dumb. It's not cool. Look at all their stars. The best they can do is weekend at Bernie's Biden. Come on. That's the best they can do. He looks like the symbol of their ideology. He looks as vital and young and vigorous as their ideas. That's what he looks. He is the perfect symbol A man who is hanging out with Robert Byrd, right? KKK Robert Byrd and Jeff and Joe Biden hanging out together. And Facebook, they are so pathetic, these little corporate fascists at Facebook, that their little fact checkers want to make sure that whenever you share a meme that shows Joe Biden hanging out with KKK Byrd, oh, they went, it's not true. He wasn't a grand wizard. He was just a super cyclops super soldier. Ooh, I mean, it's like, you guys are pathetic losers. Did you know Mark Zuckerberg's group is an apologist for KKK Byrd? Because they're experts about, I guess, KKK titles, you see. That's what you go to. If you want to learn anything about facts, go to Facebook to learn about the particularities of KKK hierarchy. Because their fact checkers will make sure you know all about that. They are experts on that crap. They won't tell you anything about your health. They won't tell you anything about vitamin D. They won't tell you anything about the stupidity of having mass mail-in ballots. They won't tell you anything that has to do with real-life issues. But if you want to get into the expertise of Facebook fact checkers, go share a meme that slightly gets the rank and title of Biden's best friend, KKK Robert Byrd. Go share that meme, and those little idiots, they will crawl out of the little nasty little swamp places where they live or wherever the hell they're at in Facebook land over in LA or San Francisco. Who knows where they live? It's all the same. It's just the same stupid, stinky, imperial, decadent, decaying imperial nonsense. We're tired of it. But these people, they will come out of the woodwork in a heartbeat to tell you the expertise that they have, which is KKK rank and titles. They know all about that. Don't ask them a thing about how to take care of your health. Those losers will have you wearing a mask inside of your garage with no ventilation, thinking that this is a healthy way for you. I mean, these people, they are so stuck on stupid. It's insane. And it's not stupidity because of lack of intellect. It's a moral stupidity that I'm talking about. Morally foolish. And they only get their power because, again, the state has its tentacles into so many aspects of our lives that it's easy. It's grift, right? They just parasitically scrape off so much profits for so many of the industry giants that benefit from this monstrosity that they're able to live off of failed ideas far longer than those ideas would naturally stay in a market. And that's the reality of what we're in today. We have a Frankenstein ideology. We have an old, stinky, failed ideology that is owning so much of everything in D.C. And conservatives thought for the longest time, oh, yeah, but we got the military. Go look at the Pentagon now. Promoting Michel Foucault, critical theory, a stupid, idiotic court jester of a theory if I've ever seen one. That all it does is enable fascists and abusers. But that stupid critical theory, that's what the Pentagon brass loves to force down everybody in the military now. So there's your grand success from the conservative movement there. It's time to do something new. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm David Gornosky. See you in a second.
Find the best coverage of Florida sports all in one place.
SportsTalkFlorida.com covers all the Florida teams you know and love with in-depth interview coverage and insight on the team that makes the news in Florida.
Whether it's the Bucks, Lightning, Rays, Jags, Dolphins, Marlins,
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered.
or any of our college teams like the Knowles, Gators, Bulls, Canes, or Knights, you can find it all at SportsTalkFlorida.com.
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered. SportsTalkFlorida.com.
The FDA pausing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, saying it will review cases involving blood clots in 6 women who received the single shot, one who died. ABC News chief medical correspondent Dr. Jennifer Ashton on what's next.
Blood clots do unfortunately happen every single day, having nothing to do with the vaccine. They're going to look to see, is there a link? And if there's a link, is there a mechanism that can explain it?
AstraZeneca's vaccine faced similar review in Europe over clotting symptoms, but regulators there concluded there was no link. The Derek Chauvin murder trial of George Floyd continues in Minneapolis this hour. The defense calling witnesses today for the first time after the prosecution finished its case. About 10 miles away, a community is calling for justice after the shooting death of a black motorist during a traffic stop. Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter and the police chief both resigned today. State officials say Potter was the officer who killed 20-year-old Dante Wright. I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you live here as we continue to look at the news. And we're joined now by a guest. You've heard him before on this broadcast, as well as our Things Hidden podcast, which is our spinoff podcast, our online-only podcast series called Things Hidden, which is available on neighborschoice.com. But we have with us our friend Shannon Braswell. How you doing, Shannon?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on the program. I hope everybody is safe over there in Seattle. I know they don't get a lot of vitamin D over there, and that's a problem for a lot of people's health.
Yeah, well, it's starting to warm up here, so, we hope that continues.
Now, by warm up, does that mean you get about an hour of sun a day now, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe we'll say 2 hours. We'll bump it up. I won't get my hopes up.
Now,
the weather here is moody.
Seattle is known for its angsty culture. People are grumpy, they're angry, they're upset. Is it because of the rain, the lack of sunshine, the lack of freedom, the lack of market innovation? Which one is the biggest problem of all those things? I would say the vegetable oils, but that's my answer.
I think it's just probably maybe the fast pace of life here. We just, and everybody's on caffeine. We have a coffee culture here, so everybody is on their phones, on their computers, on their laptops. Everything is digital, so we're just locked into that world, and everybody's trying to meet the status quo at the job, not get fired. So I think it's a little bit of angst, and sure, the weather could have something to do with it, but for the most part, I think it's just the fast pace,
Yeah, you imagine how natural is it to be in those kind of environments. But if you're eating that kind of level of vegetable oils and coffee a day, you're going to have a fast pace to the bathroom a lot, I can imagine. So that would probably lead to that angst too. Well, let's talk about something more positive than Seattle, those wonderful people. Hey, I'm sure there's some great people. I know a few great people there. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. You always have somebody like Lot. If there's just one righteous man, Lord, we will not forsake the town, right?
Yeah, I hope I'm one of them.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some bright news. I hear that you've been working on this new startup project called brightnews.com, and I love what's going on with it. It looks like an interesting website, interesting place for news and video comments. Tell us a little bit about Bright News. What's going to be going on brightnews.com?
Yeah, well, it's an aggregated website, and we highlight various content creators who talk about various different things, from entertainment to politics to medical science, medical breakthroughs, education, tech, faith. So it's an amalgamation, if you will, of different things, various things, and we're the hope is to just kind of get more people focusing on, some key issues that are not really highlighted a lot these days. It seems that media platforms have been taken over by culture wars and racial issues, things of that nature. And so the hope is to get back to focusing on things that we feel matters most, which is human beings in general, and not trying to put one group down or silence people for their thoughts, and to give people more information, to help them to be better informed, help them to get connected to other ideas, and people.
Yeah. Let's look at some of your stories here you got on here. First thing I see here, you've got a trailer for the Great American Race Game. It's a new movie. For those who haven't heard of this film, what's this about?
Yeah, so the Great American Race Game is a documentary that focuses on the sort of downward trend that you see within the African American community here in the United States. It highlights some of the kind of historical trends, starting from the era of Reconstruction, onto the era of Lyndon B. Johnson, and this idea of kind of monopolizing, on race and focusing on that and making that the centerpiece of what's wrong within the African American community. And some of the speakers on that documentary are critiquing that idea, and they are basically saying that is not the main focus, and that wasn't the main focus, for a large period of the history when it comes to African Americans in this country. We had our own, we had businesses, we had schools, there was a lot of entrepreneurship, there was family unit, there was the father in the home, and you see with the introduction of racial politics, the breakdown of that. You see the introduction of the welfare state and how that has been detrimental to African Americans and African American families, and so you have a couple of people on there that are very well read intellectuals. You have Walter Williams, who passed away not too long ago. God rest his soul. And you have Bevelyn Beatty, who is an activist and a religious speaker. You have Camille Foster, who has his own startup, and he is someone who does work with a website called Freethink. And so, there are Glenn Lowry, who's an economist, and Larry Elder, who is another content creator that we actually highlight on Bright News.
Yeah, it's all.
So it's a.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's a very good video documentary, and I think it really encapsulates kind of very briefly what has gone on within American history when it comes to the African American community.
Yeah, that you brought up Camille Foster. I saw you on brightnews.com. You posted a video by him as well, talking about race. What are some of the takeaway points that was interesting about this clip here of Camille Foster on race on that you've highlighted on brightnews.com?
Yeah, well, Camille Foster with this particular video, and I've watched a couple of his other videos. He is an individual. He's an individual who believes in individualism. This idea that a person is not should not be looked at based on what group they belong to. He rejects the idea of tribalism. This idea that you're part of your group and everybody else is an outsider. And so he has, with this video, it's a short clip, and he's speaking about how African Americans and America has, we've transcended that notion of race and discrimination, and in large part, and that we need to take that victory and move forward in our country, and not be stagnant and stuck in this idea that the world is still against African Americans, or that this country is still against people of African descent. He believes that we should take the legacy of the civil rights movement and all the things that were done in the past and go forward with that. We are not we can't try to relive the past. We shouldn't be trying to romanticize that past and try to go back to it. We should move on. We should go forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's something that, there's a lot of people who want to divide people around tribalism, and it's become fashionable. Tribalism is becoming increasingly fashionable on the left and the right. Why do you think it's become so in style lately to double down on identity politics, whether it's race or, gender or, income or whatever it is that people glom onto to find their meaning based on some kind of external factor they have,
Well, I mean, if I had to give my own personal opinion, I think it's because it's the easiest thing to do. It's easy to, pin the blame on another group, to find what's wrong with, your neighbor, or find what's wrong with another group of people who we think belong to another tribe. We believe it's a quick fix to I would say to a problem that is not exactly that important. I don't want to say it's not important at all, but it definitely seems to be easier to stir people up around ideas of race and inequality than it is to stir people up about the fact that our infrastructure is broken, that our economy is broken, that we have problems with health, that we have problems with our culture, we have problems with education, we have problems with thinking about science and ways to put money into new startups and inventions, and so those are harder problems to deal with, and I think it's also harder to gather around things that we can't see on face value. If it has no real say form, right, then it's harder to rally around that. It's easier to rally around somebody when you see someone got shot by the cops, or that you have kids not being able to get in school because of race. We can make that the center of our conversation, and and highlight those things. And so I'll just say it's easier to do.
So it's easier to find. It's easier to focus on problems that you can easily scapegoat somebody for than problems that take a lot of thinking and hard work and discipline to fix.
Sure, yeah. And, you can't, if someone is suffering from, Alzheimer's, dementia, or, bad health, that seems more to be like a personal problem. You did something to yourself or what have you, or that takes years to get up to that point. So whatever. This is the killing of a unarmed black male is much easier to pinpoint and direct people's attention to.
Right. Yeah, and that gets into, we're going to take a quick break. We're speaking with Shannon Braswell, who's with brightnews.com. When we return, I want to get into another video I saw highlighted at brightnews.com about a guy who's going off on a CNN reporter on the scene of this latest protest situation that's occurred in Minneapolis area. And we'll take a quick break and return. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornosky, your host, and you can call in at 727-587-1040 or email me hello@aneighborschoice.com or drop us a comment on YouTube. Back in a second. Hello, who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Hello, this is David Gornosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Hello, David Gornosky here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm here with Shannon Braswell, talking about the news site that he's been working on, brightnews.com, which is just launched, where it's a collection of news, articles, and video clips about culture, politics, science, innovation, health, just a kind of aggregator of video content and some news stories. So, Shannon, I wanted to ask you about this clip I saw you highlight on the site about man destroys CNN for irresponsible coverage of the riots, an expletive-laced rant on live camera.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He kind of busted her up. I guess she thought she was going to get the typical response, and that's not what he gave her. He told her, it's news platforms like this that basically fuel the fire and make things worse. He had a critique of the protesters, and of news platforms, saying that protesters shouldn't be in the streets rioting. They should be at the courthouse. They should do it where it matters. And he basically, using a religious term here, he rebuked her for doing that. And she had no choice but to, back down. So, I think, for whatever it's worth, it goes to show you that, not every protester is thinking in terms of trying to destroy, everything, but, they want to, he wanted to highlight the fact that, it is, news platforms that, they fuel, the frustration. They highlight all the violence and the problems, and make things worse. And I think he was right in saying, I don't think there was anything wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to see, those moments when the television is trying to manufacture a feeling for the audience, and then somebody just disrupts that feeling live in the moment,
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad that they caught that on camera and put it up, because I think it's important to show that there's different dynamics going on when you see this kind of civil unrest. It's not a one-sided thing, and not everybody has the same mindset going into these things.
Yeah.
So I think it was important.
And it's in this latest situation, if they always try to make it about a race war, there's a war on black people, and everybody's out to get everybody, and all this stuff they try to stoke. But I look at it and I thought, just from what I've heard, they tried to start a story that he was pulled over because he had a air freshener hanging on the rearview mirror, and then they said no, that actually wasn't what it was. It was because of an expired tag or something. And
it was an expired. Yeah.
What was that? Is that what it was? Expired tag?
I heard that it was an outstanding warrant.
Okay.
For his arrest. Because
of an expired license or something like that?
That I'm not sure, yeah. but I do know it was because I heard that it was an outstanding warrant for his arrest.
So the TV news is like any kind of fantasy or reality programming. They want to create an experience, right? They want to create a narrative. And right. The narrative that they're trying to do, they just need a little bit of something, and they can take a lot and stretch it into something else. And
right.
When people are locked up all day, they can't go to concerts. In some more authoritarian places, they have to get on a waiting list just to go to church. That is a nightmare's pressure cooker that creates a condition in which people are hungry for a scapegoat, and all it takes is CNN to prey on people, especially on people who are dealing with mental illness, paranoia, right. Antisocial sentiments. And they're looking at the television, right. And television says, somebody's getting shot because of there's an air freshener in the car. That's such a triggering thing for people who are already abused by this bad government response to this virus,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that it, you can have a certain level of, stir up when you have, a lockdown such as the one we have been going through for, just over a year now. And, a lot of people's emotions are, up and down, and they're confused, and they don't know, what to think about a lot of things. And, it's easy to, again, find, unity around, something like this. We have to, I think one of the things is that's important is to backtrack and to think about how all of this started. I'm not one to put any blame on, say China or anything like that. But, I do believe that, we have to think about these things in different ways and not so much being, reactionary. And, the first thing we think is this is a racial issue, or, it all centers around, racial disparity. I find that to be too simplistic. And I think if it's too simplistic, then it's probably not the right answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's the problem with the television media and newspapers, is they're all stuck on they're trying to revivify a scapegoat mechanism that has long been defeated in history 2,000 years ago, and they don't have the memo yet. They're desperate. They're still trying to use might makes right, but to dress it up in the name of concern for victims, and it's just going to fail the more we try to play that game.
Sure, I would say they have the memo, but they're just not looking at it. I mean, they're making the choice to ignore it.
Yeah, their eyesight's so bad from eating vegetable oils and soybeans that they can't see the memo.
Right.
Well, luckily we have brightnews.com on the scene, and A Neighbor's Choice, and many other great new media platforms that we hope will become the institutions not only of today but for tomorrow, and many others will imitate the things that we're trying to do here, which empowers the human person. And I think you share that same desire. Take care of the human person, and you take care of the whole world, right? If we take care of nutrition and health and, giving people a sense of self-ownership and hope and ambition and wanting to take on challenges of nature, that opens up a whole avenue of opportunities for us to really have a lot to do, right? And be ambitious in doing it.
100%. I agree 100%.
Shannon, thanks for coming on the program, and best of luck with brightnews.com. We look forward to seeing how it continues to develop with interest.
Hey, thanks for having me on, David.
All right, and that's it for hour one. When we return in just a moment, we'll hear from Jeffrey Tucker of AIER.org, the American Institute for Economic Research. He's been on the front lines of trying to understand the lockdown madness. We're going to dive into that, get into some of the stuff that they've had with censorship on AIER.org. You don't want to miss it. Jeffrey Tucker, always a very passionate defender of liberty. Back in just a moment. We'll continue.
Talk and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. The White House says the FDA pause on J&J COVID-19 vaccines will not affect vaccinations, but cases of blood clots are raising new questions.
Health officials say the few reported patient blood clots after the J&J vaccine are rare.
There have been 6 out of the 6.85 million doses, which is less than 1 in a million.
Dr. Anthony Fauci saying they're pausing the J&J vaccine to review all the data, and that virtually anyone who's had the shot more than 2 weeks ago isn't likely to have an issue. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
In Minneapolis, the defense began its case in the Derek Chauvin murder trial.
Barry Broad, a use of force expert for the defense, testified that he felt Derek Chauvin's actions were objectively reasonable, saying that even when Floyd was on the ground, he was resisting officers. He was asked about that during cross-examination by the prosecution.
Struggling or rioting? I don't know the difference.
Broad said he felt it would be reasonable to assume that what prosecutors have called efforts by Floyd to reposition so he could breathe were instead further efforts by Floyd to resist arrest. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
Just outside Minneapolis, another community calling for justice.
The anguished prayers of Dante Wright's relatives and their supporters echoed through the snow flurries in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where he was shot and killed during a traffic stop by an officer who thought she was reaching for her taser when she instead pulled her gun. Mayor Mike Elliott said Officer Kim Potter and Police Chief Tim Gannon have resigned.
I'm hoping that this will help bring some calm to the community.
The mayor said the city did not ask the officer to resign, but he said it was the right thing to do. Aaron Katursky, ABC News.
At the Capitol, the casket of fallen U.S. Capitol Police Officer Billy Evans lies in honor. Earlier at a ceremony, President Biden called Evans a hero. He was struck and killed this month when a man tried to drive through a Capitol barricade. You're listening to ABC News.
Maybe you can relate to this. A lot of people think they're stuck with their health plan. It costs too much, or for whatever reason, they just don't like it. The great news, you are not stuck with it. There is a choice. It's called MediShare, and you could save so much. The typical savings for a family is $500 a month. Major difference maker. This is the affordable alternative to health insurance. And just to give you a little more info about MediShare, it's a Christian healthcare sharing ministry. It's worked beautifully for 26 years, has more than 400,000 members, and they've shared over $3 billion of each other's medical bills. So yes, they can help share your needs too. So you're not stuck. There's an excellent alternative, whether you're single or married, you got a family. MediShare is super flexible. You can choose an option that works for you and start saving lots of money. You can join anytime. They're great to talk to, no pressure. Call 877-26-BIBLE. That's 877-26-BIBLE. 877-26-BIBLE.
Democratic leaders are calling on their Republican colleagues to support the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. It addresses the uptick in violence against Asian Americans. That bill, introduced by Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii.
It asks the Department of Justice to work in conjunction with the state and local law enforcement to ensure that the word gets out in appropriate language, culturally appropriate, that these kinds of crimes should be prevented, should be reported.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says that bill should be bipartisan. France taking steps to cut carbon emissions.
French lawmakers moving to ban short internal flights where the same journey could be made by train in under 2.5 hours. The measure could affect travel between Paris and cities like Nantes, Lyon, and Bordeaux. This comes as airlines around the world are still reeling from the coronavirus pandemic, with website Flight Radar 24 reporting that the number of flights last year were down almost 42% from 2019. The measure would not apply to routes that form part of a connecting flight. Inez de la Quintera, ABC News, Paris.
Air Canada getting some relief. The Canadian government has agreed to pump over $4.5 billion into the carrier. The agreement would protect thousands of jobs and also allows Air Canada to buy dozens of new jets. This is ABC News.
For over 40 years, Ray Reynolds has helped customers get millions in credit. It's no wonder why they call him the godfather of credit. Ray Reynolds will get your score above 720. Do you need $50,000 of corporate credit? By using corporate credit, you can finance a business by real under a corporation. Now you can meet Ray Reynolds on his daily webinar at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. Go to rayswebinar.com and check out his free, very informative webinar, or call 800-490-40 now. That's rayswebinar.com or call 800-490-4140.
I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm raised. I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in Southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
The Firestone Grand Prix roars through the streets of beautiful downtown St. Petersburg, April 23rd to the 25th. It's fast, fun, family entertainment jammed into each day. The NTT IndyCar Series headlines an action-packed weekend of racing under the sun, featuring 6 different series, including the return of the high-flying Stadium Super Trucks. Get your tickets now at gpsmtd.com. GPSTPETE.com. Tickets start at $25. Visit GPSTPETE.com.
Yeah, hi, Jeffrey.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornosky. So glad to be with you live again for our second hour of today's broadcast, where we come to you live on radio, video stream, and podcast, all found on our website, aneighborschoice.com. If you're listening in the car, set it to this station. This affiliate will be your go-to place to hear our program weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you're listening on podcast, make sure you subscribe to the feed and write a review if you enjoy the program, or whatever you'd like to do that helps get the word out for us. And we are going to take a look at the topic of the lockdowns. What is going on with the lockdowns? What is going on with the censorship surrounding anybody who questions the monoculture media, the media that I call them the TV party? They always want to have one story. They do not like dissent. They censor anybody, including the most decorated scientists you can imagine and doctors, for any mild dissent. And to do so, we're going to talk to an old friend of mine, someone who has published some of my articles back at fee.org years ago, and he now heads up the editorial work at AIER.org, the American Institute for Economic Research. We have with us Jeffrey Tucker. How you doing, Jeffrey?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on the program. It's been a while since we talked, and we were talking about all the abuses to liberty back in the day, and man, it feels so quaint compared to how they've escalated things since, huh?
Well, we thought in the old days that we were just tweaking things on the margin, like things could be better, like we should be freer. They shouldn't do this. They shouldn't do that. They should instead do this. They should do that. And about 1 year ago, I guess basically a year and a month ago, March 12th, 2020, they took all of our liberties away. We went under house arrest. They shut our churches. They closed our schools. They robbed us of our businesses and treated us all like animals and cattle. And the Constitution didn't matter. Bill of Rights did not matter. Nothing actually mattered anymore. And it was an absolute shock. And it's going to be generations, I would say, before we get over this, because the children's lives have been destroyed. Our lives have been destroyed. We're demoralized. We still can't figure out what happened, that we thought we lived in a society with more or less freedom and law. And then overnight, it turned out because of a virus, it was all taken away from us.
And there's so many components to this madness. It feels like a global claustrophobic feeling or something that's just pervasive madness coming at us from different angles. But is there an elephant in the room that sticks out to you as something that you focused your attention on? There's so many layers. There's the censorship. There's the desire to, kind of politically bias the science. There's the lockdowns, the masks, there's so many layers to it. And we're going to get into a few of the different components today. But what kind of stands out to you the most as the elephant in the room or the problem?
So this is I think this is the most fundamentally difficult question, is to find the one thing, because I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a perfect storm of everything. And I think the human mind is wired to try to figure out, what is the one evil? Where's the elephant, as you say? And I don't think it quite exists. I mean, you've got, if I started listing it, I'd probably get up to 9, but you've got the 24/7 news coverage. You've got the screwed up epidemiological computerized models. You've got Bill Gates funding. You've got Anthony Fauci's basically monopoly over NIH funding, and so therefore the corruption of science. You have political panic. You have public ignorance of virology and immunology. You have, a ruling class in this country that's, God bless our prosperity. But the problem is we have ever more and more people, we're up to about a third, who can just live in their slippers at home, taking Zoom calls. So they're lazy and they've lost work ethic and they welcome the lockdowns. So, and then so that aspect of things, the ruling class desire to just basically let the working class bear the burden of herd immunity is a gigantic sociological driver of lockdowns. Then you have the pharmaceutical industry and their massive desire for subsidies and profits by giving everybody a jab. And then finally, you have, I would say, when I say finally, I probably could list 5 others, but I will finally mention the role of China here, right? Which trolled us really hard and figured out where our weak links are and how stupid we are and reliant we are and how fearful we are and how much attached to Western medicine we are and how our ultimate fear, in the West is always about cleanliness and disease. And they figured that out and they deployed it and it all happened at once. David, I might as well mention a final factor, Trump, right? Yeah. So a lot of it came down to wanting to get Trump out. So I think I've mentioned about 7 things. Yeah. And I think the real problem is that it's hard for the human mind to think at that level of complexity. But I think all those things matter.
Yeah, and the things that have suffered has been our health, our mental health, our financial health, and our cultural health. People are, getting more and more paranoid, more and more collectivist. This is a pretty dark time for those of us who love liberty. At the same time, because so much of it has become so aggressive, I have to wonder if maybe it's a hopeful time because a lot of people who would normally be very happy-go-lucky about a very interventionist state-run economy like we have now started to see, hey, maybe this is not a good idea. For example, like food license laws, all these people that had their restaurants shut down for all these ridiculous things. Well, folks who love liberty have been talking about occupational licensure for a long time and how, and that was always like, what is that? Some kind of fringe thing. That's no one cares about that. But now people do care because they say, wait a second, that's what's on the books that allows these people to come in and say, you can't have your business open, you can't have your restaurant open. So maybe this is a good moment too, in some sense, right?
Well, I think it's what's important. In a sense, you're right. I would say that, we experience what we now call lockdown. So keep in mind that before this time last year, we didn't even have that term. We didn't even know what that word meant. I mean, we didn't speak about lockdowns. We never imagined they were possible. Now, there really are 2 kinds of thinkers out there, those who are for lockdown and those who are against lockdown. And I don't see any space between them, right? You have to choose. And what constitutes lockdown? Well, every act of state coercion, I would say, against the individual that is unjustified by matters of justice. So I would say in a funny way, we've gone through a huge ideological paradigm shift in the last year. The lockdowners who revealed themselves. And by the way, when I say the lockdowners, I mean, look, it's nonpartisan. There are lockdowners on the right, lockdowners on the left. I mean, they're libertarian lockdowners, if you can believe it. There are theocratic lockdowners. There's all kinds of people who do not trust society to work and think that you can outsmart an invisible pathogen. Those are the lockdowners. And the people who resisted the lockdowners, brave, smart, tenacious, and those people similarly come from the left and the right and everything in between. So evangelicals and libertarian anti-lockdown. So it really is a kind of dualism that our times have set us up in, ideological dualism. It's like, are you for or against lockdowns? And I think that's a question that every politician and every citizen has to ask himself. Where do I stand on the great issue of our time? Do people have rights? Do they have liberties? Are they, what was Thomas Jefferson's word, inalienable?
Right.
Or are they contingent upon the judgment of elites and the ruling class?
And I think this year has shown that most of the public it seems, say that rights are just whatever the chieftain says you have, basically. I think we've learned the truth about our fellow citizens here, you know.
Yeah, and there's other shocking things. Like one of the things that I still can't quite get over is how the fact that the court system didn't work at all. I mean, I think more or less we knew the court system was not efficient, it's something we want to avoid, but we thought that the rule of law would at least protect us. But what we've learned over the last year is that when, civilization is sweeping to destruction, there is no protection. No one's safe, know, and the courts are not going to save you.
Right.
They're useless to you when you need them the most. A year later, we're now seeing lawsuits and that sort of thing, and that's great. I'm glad for that. New Civil Liberties Alliance is doing some great work and bringing all kinds of lawsuits against, class action lawsuits against the CDC and so on, and it's all good. But what's striking is that none of this happened, last year.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We're going to get into some of this. I want to ask you about some of the censorship that you've seen. We'll take a quick break. We're talking with Jeffrey Tucker of AIER.org, the American Institute for Economic Research. When we return, we're going to get into how YouTube censored Florida Governor DeSantis and his science advisors, which is a story Jeffrey Tucker just published last week, and get into some other things around this. Back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski, here with our friend Jeffrey Tucker of AIER.org as we look at the ramifications of the lockdowns and the lockdown culture that has swept like a hysteria. And Jeffrey, you may remember that I wrote, and I still do, talk a lot about the work of Rene Girard and anthropology about this idea that human beings are mimetic, that they are prone to being possessed by groupthink, that they catch desires like they catch diseases, and that they're always finding scapegoats, a very essential tool in a time of crisis. And I think this year has been the most Girardian year of my lifetime, and probably for decades before, you know?
Well, you have talked about that in the past, and it's very interesting how many religious metaphors there are all around us. I mean, it's very interesting when you consider the spiritual dimension of the lockdown personality is essentially of that of a penitent. You know,
yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why in the lockdowns you couldn't do anything fun. You couldn't go to the movies. You couldn't drink a beer. You couldn't go to the symphonies. The art basically was abolished, and we had to reduce our lives to the bare essentials. I mean, in a sense, it was also very interesting how we migrated from the physical world into a purely Zoom class and reduced the physicalness of our life functioning to the minimum most possible, similar to followers of the prophet Mani, you know, under the Manichaeans, you know, so that the Manichaean theory was that the physical world is basically of the devil, of the darkness, and we want to escape it as much as possible and migrate to a purely, you know, internal spiritual world, and even our food should be, you know, delivered to us. And the followers of the prophet Mani used to camp out under fruit trees so that they wouldn't even have to pick them, you know, just let them fall on the ground and eat them. And that was the way to obtain sort of perfection. In a similar way, you know, the Zoom class under the modern Manichaeanism, you know, got their groceries delivered to them, you know, and the driver would run away, you know, so they could continue their pure disease-free spiritual life in their rooms, you know, so there's an element of heaven there. There's also, you know, in the Middle Ages, there were, you're probably aware of this group called the Flagellants, right?
Uh-huh.
So the Flagellants believed that, so it was generally believed that the plagues and pathogens came about as a punishment from God for our sins. And so the only way really to get rid of the pathogen was not through herd immunity or something like that, or better sanitation. It was through spiritual cleansing. And so the plague was quite frequently blamed on sinfulness. And so the Flagellants devoted themselves entirely to going from town to town, wearing sackcloth and ashes and that sort of thing, and beating themselves with ropes, famously featured in, I think, Monty Python's, you know, Holy Grail. But, you know, they're real groups, and they would travel from town to town. Their purpose was to display to the unrepentant people, you know, the people who are going about their lives, the people who refuse to be locked down, for example, and display to them that their fun, their failure to suffer, was causing the others, the Flagellants in particular, to have to beat themselves even harder, right? Yeah. So it was an attempt to sort of spread guilt. Well, we've seen that exact same thing now, and we've all experienced it, right? You know, you go to the store and there's a lady, you know, dressed up like a Taliban wife, you know, with goggles and the gloves, and glares at you for standing closer than 6 feet and so on. So we've these people are all around us now. So we're no better now than we were then. And so, yeah, it's very much a religious metaphor. And I thought it was very interesting too. I'll mention two other points with respect to this. There were two communities that just went on with their lives as if nothing was going on. One was the Hasidic Jews in New York, and the other was the Amish, of course. Now, the Amish, to my knowledge, the Amish were never accused of being super spreaders. But definitely Cuomo and de Blasio in New York accused the Hasidic Jews of spreading disease.
Yeah.
which again takes us back to the Middle Ages, right? That's exactly what would always happen. The pathogen would come, people would blame the Jews. That's where we get the phrase poisoning the well. It was like, well, the Jews poisoned our well, you know. And so de Blasio and Cuomo did the same thing. First scapegoating, and then demanding from everybody some sort of penitent sacrifices, propitiation for our sins. And so what in this case constitutes our sin? And this is where it gets really, I think, to my mind, a little bit spooky. I think our sin was having Donald Trump as president, right? So he himself became the metaphor for the virus that we had to drive out through sacrifice and lockdowns.
Right.
That's my Girgardian.
Well, you're that's pretty. I like it. It's good, you know, because it's true, you know, because and of course, you know, Trump tried to create a counter scapegoat narrative to blame it on China, you know, and
there you go,
and that didn't work. That didn't quite, you know, land as much because the cultural, you know, institutions of news media much preferred to, you know, to tie him as the pathogen that must be purged. And I like that way you said that we need to be in punishment because we had a little bit too much wildness. We let a heretic into the halls of power. Not that he's a heretic in the sense that he's a threat to interventionist government, but simply the fact that he doesn't use the rhetoric that is sacred to hide the violence of the state. You know what I mean? And
that's right.
And that was just an unforgivable sin.
So lockdowns were nothing other than a confessional, right? It's like get on your knees, confess that you like Trump, and recognize the social calamity thereupon realized by his presidency, and feel bad for that. Recognize that you've offended, the civic order, and now pledge to never do that again, and always avoid the near occasion of voting for a Republican.
Yeah.
And nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
And it makes you wonder if in an alternate universe, if he had been really pro masks and very pro getting scared about this virus, if this thing would have really been just 2 weeks, and that would have been it. You know, we would have been back to the same old, perhaps. If he had.
No, you're right, but there was David. This was a funny moment from mid-February to, I would say, something like about March 10th. There was a funny moment in that period in which the left and right have shifted in this country. So the many people on the right, and I would like nobody wants to talk about this, but among whom I'd include, like, for example, Tucker Carlson, but there are many other people who saw the pathogen as being, apocalyptic and, a punishment for a capitalist sins, and right before the people forget this, and Tucker's been doing the Lord's work ever since. But back in the early days, he was, giving anti-capitalist screeds on television all the time. And then he saw the pathogen as being a really exciting way to punish Americans for it. And it was he apparently who convinced Trump to lock down. And meanwhile, in that exact same period, all these center-left journals were disparaging the germ and saying we should go about our lives normally, including Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, and then they switch narratives. So interesting. Let's continue on that note. We'll take a quick news break and hear what the state media outlet ABC has to say. Back in just a second, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Politics these days are just that, politics. Pathetic discussions about things that don't matter, while the pandemic, crime, and economic disparity march on. That's why you need a balanced approach to news, business, and entertainment in the state of Florida. That publication is newstalkflorida.com. Whether it's the White House, the courthouse, or your neighbor's house, News Talk Florida has the sources, articles, video, and audio that will be a must daily check-in from your laptop or mobile device. Take a look at newstalkflorida.com. Today's news and entertainment with a Florida slant.
The FDA has recommended a nationwide pause of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine to look into reports of rare but potentially dangerous blood clots.
Blood clots do unfortunately happen every single day, having nothing to do with the vaccine. They're going to look to see, is there a link? And if there's a link, Is there a mechanism that can explain it?
ABC News chief medical correspondent Dr. Jennifer Ashton, the Brooklyn Center, Minnesota police officer who shot and killed Dante Wright, and the department's chief have resigned.
I'm hoping that this will help bring some calm to the community. Although, I think ultimately people want justice. They want, full accountability under the law.
Mayor Mike Elliott, defense attorneys in the trial of Derek Chauvin called a use of force expert to the witness stand who said the former Minneapolis police officer was justified in pinning George Floyd to the ground. President Biden is expected to announce that all U.S. troops will be out of Afghanistan by September 11th, except for those who protect U.S. diplomats. Daria Albinger, ABC.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm here with Jeffrey Tucker of AIER.org, the American Institute for Economic Research. So, Jeffrey, that's just interesting. I wanted to ask you again. So again, we're just speculating here. It's hard to do that, counterfactual history or whatever, but it's so interesting to think if Trump had stayed in that if he had taken a hard line stance on everybody get your mask on, it's going to be huge, we're going to do wonderful masks, everybody wear a mask, everybody let's do a lockdown. If he had just stayed on that, would we be in an alternate universe? Would that have been a 2-week blip and we would have just moved on and life would be kind of the way it used to be?
So you're speaking something like, let's say, January and February, if you had taken that position?
Yeah.
Instead of dismissing it?
Yeah. If you had just really taken it early and really boldly on that, would that have changed a lot of this?
That's... I would say for a certain sector of the commentariat, I think you might be right. If he had been a hawk against the virus, then, the New Republic and Salon and Psychology Today and all the people who are putting down, dismissing the virus in late February might have persisted in that, or at least been more attentive to the science. It's very possible, but he drove them crazy. And I think at some point they realized, sometime in mid-February, they realized that they had a good strategy, that they could pursue lockdowns, which is, grotesque to me. It's like, who are these people? Like the Joker? They just want to destroy everything? It's something like that. I mean, there's a level of perversity, but there's complications to every aspect of the story. So one of the things that's very interesting, Judicial Watch used a FOIA request to get all the emails of Anthony Fauci. And there were all kinds of emails throughout mid-February that revealed that the U.S. NIH and the CDC sent a delegation to Beijing to learn from Beijing successful efforts at virus mitigation. And there's no question that they went there and they learned and they came back and they decided to implement that same strategy here. So I'm not sure whether Trump's position on this would have affected that, because I think there's actually a bigger agenda here. It has something to do with the desire to deploy a kind of a modular computer science-based totalitarianism, and just as an experiment, which I'm certain that they did that. Like, the New York Times got trolled by Donald McNeil, into taking that position, and many of the epidemiologists were afraid to contradict Fauci and so on. So there's no question that there was a kind of a machinery of lockdownism. But they made a huge mistake, actually, and it has something to do with intellectual arrogance. What they claimed was, and it was a very precise claim, our non-pharmaceutical interventions, our targeted layered containments, our social distancing and masking will mitigate the virus and give us better results than if you just let yourself be free. And people who consider themselves to be vulnerable temporarily protect themselves while herd immunity is built up. This is how we handled every pathogen in the history of the 20th century. So they claimed that they could do it better. And in this sense, they sort of remind me of the beginning of the collapse of communism after World War II, where Khrushchev really set out to prove that communism would be more economically productive than capitalism. And that's a strict empirical claim. Give me all power, comply with my plan, and you will see Russia will outperform the U.S. Yeah. Well, it didn't happen. And ultimately, that's what undid communism. I mean, a lot of years later, but that's what happened. I think we're seeing the collapse of lockdownism right now in real time. So it's a serious problem when intellectuals set up a kind of test for their theories. And they've done that. And in the U.S., we have 50 different states with 50 different policies. So we're free now to look at the policies relative to the outcomes. And what you see is that there's no relationship whatsoever between disease mitigation and these non-pharmaceutical interventions, or as Fauci calls them today, methods.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So if you cannot demonstrate an empirical relationship between those two things, you're actually on really thin ice. So, and the other thing is that the data is freely available to everybody. And so we can look at what happened in Florida after they opened. Florida has about mid-levels of death per capita of all the states. It's been open since, I guess, since summer, and fully open since something like August, and with no restrictions whatsoever, no masks. Texas, idiots, followed Governor Abbott, for a long lockdown starting in April, but they just relented now about 5 weeks ago, and the governor, jealous of the fame of DeSantis and Kristen in South Dakota, just repealed all of his powers in one fell swoop. Got rid of everything all at once. This was on something like March 2nd. He implemented it in March. Went effective March 8th, but it was in effect, by March 2nd. And now we look at the data and we see the cases are plummeting. By the way, I don't care about cases. I'm glad for cases to go up. I think the pathogens go, and that's just the way it is. But most of them are asymptomatic anyway, so they shouldn't be called cases. They should be called infections, if that. But what we should be looking at is severe outcomes, namely hospitalizations and, most importantly, deaths. And so those have plummeted, 75, 80% since the full opening of Texas. Texas is a big state with large population centers, a lot of, population density. There's rural areas, there's urban areas, there's all kinds of things. Texas is a proxy for the whole nation. And what we see is a better outcomes in Texas than you see, for example, in Michigan or Massachusetts or California, which are full lockdown states. So this is a problem for the science. When science says we can do something better if you give us all power, and we're like, okay. And then we compare the people with the outcomes of in the states where people exercise totalitarian powers versus those that just went a full kind of do your own thing, be free, have your rights. And the free states have better disease outcomes, then you have the collapse of the paradigm. So right now, as we're speaking, that's what we're going through, the complete collapse of the lockdown paradigm. It's devastating.
But what do you do for the Luddites who buy into the TV manufactured reality or this digital Zoom world that you're talking about, where they see that and they just double down like fundamentalists who are going to go down with the cult? What do we do for that? Because it seems to be a lot of Americans that are in that still.
So there's a bit of an intellectual sunk cost fallacy. People have sacrificed David so much for the last 14 months, and they want to believe that it was not for just no reason whatsoever. So they manufacture these things. The other thing is that there's a certain psychology of disease panic. Once people go about their lives normally, they don't think about the pathogen, and then suddenly the pathogen arrives and they fly into a panic. Then this happened with AIDS, I think, all those years ago. It happens from time to time that human beings, especially clean, rich, prosperous people who are detached from, especially in the computer age, the physical world, they fly into a disease panic. And once that happens, that sort of psychological fear, it grips them for a very long time. In Camus' book called The Plague, even after the pathogen left and herd immunity has arrived and life went back to normal, there was still a minority of people, it doesn't give a percentage, but I'm going to say it's 10%, that will always will live in fear.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now.
So you think that you don't see that the majority of Americans are in that hysterical lockdown or death mentality?
No. I mean, there's gradients here, right? And the other thing is a lot of people are just traumatized that they went along with it.
Because when you think of that staggering vote count that weekend that Bernie's Biden got, 84 million Americans, you'd think that was like a resounding endorsement for lockdowns, or give me lockdowns or give me death. That was America's big endorsement to that. But you're saying not so much.
It was never clear to me exactly what the public opinion was towards the lockdowns. I know we saw polls, but it's hard to trust these polls and these things. I think, David, I'm guessing that sometime in mid-March, for about 3 to 4 weeks, a sizable majority of Americans were panicked, and mostly due to news media, right? So you had people collapsing on the streets in China. You had northern Italy seeming to, run out of hospital space and, mass graves and that kind of stuff. And then you had, in New York in particular, you had sirens roaring all night and many visible, seeming evidence of a pandemic. So all those things combined, and that lasted, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks. And then people started crawling out of their hovels and trying to get back to normal. And the percentage of people who are worried about this virus has declined and declined and declined. And it's a serious problem because the gap between the fear and the reality is unspeakably huge. I mean, our pathogens don't come labeled with a infection fatality ratio, but as best anybody can tell, it's about on a global basis, not in the United States because we have an elderly population and with a lot of comorbidities, but on a global basis, once you correct for everything, the IFR is 0.15%, and that compares very closely with what the World Health Organization has said is the annual flu. So I'm almost certain that when all the data are in, we're going to realize, and it might take a few years, that this was a very normal pathogen. It was new. So we didn't really know about it. The funny thing about that whole new virus thing is that every virus is new.
Right.
There's always a new virus. My own read on the situation is that there wasn't anything particularly alarming about this virus. It was just another virus. It had an outsized severity of outcomes because we have developed the capacity over the last 20 to 30 years of sustaining life, to implausible lengths, and using our wealth to subsidize, equipment and living conditions that really push the limits, I would say, of life expectancy.
I think another factor is the fact that, I call it single payer nutrition science has poisoned millions and millions of Americans with government subsidies to toxic seed oils, these vegetable oils, soybean oil, canola oil. These vegetable oils, they're found in the chicken we eat that are fed corn and soy. They're found in the pork that we eat. They're found in most restaurants, the fried foods, packaged processed goods. And that stuff is so linked to all the comorbidities that, it's government subsidized trash. And that's what,
and that trash has been subsidized since the early 70s when, the Secretary of Agriculture decided that it was impossible to have too much corn. Well, we developed mountains of corn. We had to figure out what to do with it. So we put it in all of our foods. We got rid of our sugar and made corn syrup. We got rid of our gasoline and made, corn gas or whatever the hell. And I was once you become conscious of this, I remember going into a convenience store some years ago. I was looking, I was kind of hungry, and I wanted something without a corn product in it. There wasn't a single thing in the entire convenience store that didn't have corn in it. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, and the demographics here are gigantically important for the severity of outcomes. If SARS-CoV-2 had arrived in 1918, it's interesting to think about. I think we had lifespans that were about 56 years of age. It would have been almost invisible. I mean, think about that. Almost invisible, close to invisible, and almost not even noticeable 100 years ago. So the reason we took note of it is that all at once, we had a whole population of people that were dying, in excess of what one might expect. I'm guessing here again, this data are tricky and we're still waiting for it to all come in. But I think in about a year or two, once we get the death certificates sized up and we eliminate the misclassification of deaths, which is a gigantic number of people from the system, and investigate excess deaths, not in just 1 year, but over the course of, say, 5 years. My guess is you will not have seen an increase. I think probably there was just what in a slightly crude way, what people call dry tinder was there. And this is why in countries with younger populations, with more robust immune systems, let's just say, for example, all of Africa, you saw almost no severity of SARS-CoV-2 at all. Whereas in the United States, the clean people and old people and unhealthy people, the pathogen comes along and that's the thing that takes people out finally. I think that is the actual story. As for the 20-somethings that are walking around, as I say, wrapped in blankets and wearing goggles and everything, these people are just insane people.
And now they're trying to say that they want to they're doing tests on little babies and toddlers and kids to get the vaccine next.
It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. We actually do need exposure, and we need exposure equally as a democratic people. We cannot impose the burden of herd immunity on the workers and peasants. I mean, that's wrong. We've developed a caste system in this country, the clean versus the unclean, and it's totally contrary to all Western society, as are masks, by the way.
Yeah.
And all the way we've behaved over the last 14 months is a fundamental attack on everything we were meant to be: civilized, enlightened, and free.
Back to anthropology and history, usually when you would have a mask ritual, it was associated with a sacred time, a festival in which you would culminate the undifferentiation of letting loose, going wild, doing things, being mischievous, getting into orgies, getting into shared feasts, in mask, and then you would end it with a sacrifice. And so that goes back to kind of that theme you were talking about earlier with looking for a sacrifice. I like the theme that you were talking about there about this Zoom class, and you tied it into this Manichaean religion, this idea of this Gnostic transcendence. A commenter reads, right before you even said that, he posted on our comment stream, he said, I think he's basically saying this group is anti-human, elitist technocrats trying to deify themselves as transhuman. Do you see that as what's going on here? That's kind of connected to this, not that all transhumanists are on board with the policies that we've seen over the year, but is that what this is? Is this some kind of
they
attempt
imagine themselves to be clean people, and they render the human body as like a hard drive, and the point of a hard drive is to keep it free of pathogens by using the right kind of antivirus technology. It's a piece of software. So our vaccines have become our piece of software. Our bodies are our hard drives, and the hard drive should be free of pathogens and clean forever, so that our systems can work well and we can ascend to digital greatness. So it's all connected. It's grotesque. I mean, there's a reason with it. Bill Gates.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah, I mean
he doesn't want us to eat flesh either, right? So there's your transhumanism. You got to eat manufactured meat instead of real meat, right?
None of these people are willing to recognize, the basic realities of mortality. I mean, I just, I'm always amazed, because the bromides that people throw out, because, for a year I've been attacking lockdowns and trying to put this virus in perspective, and people scream numbers at me, like 500,000 Americans are dying. Well, how many do you think are supposed to die? I mean, millions die every year. All right. So, yeah, and that's bad, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, but I'm sorry. Are we unwilling to come to terms with deaths? I think we are, actually. Mm-hmm. Some years ago, I wrote a reflection on death that was quoting several homilies by the great Cardinal Newman. And it was a lighthearted essay about when you have pets that eventually die and how traumatizing that is, but also our unwillingness to come to terms with death. Every time somebody dies, it's like, our first question is, what of? Well, I mean, she was 114 years old. Yeah, but how'd she die? Come on. Yeah. Well, I remember after writing that essay, I got several emails from people who were outraged. And what were they outraged about? That I was on the side of believing in mortality. Yeah. I mean, like, I honestly, I don't know how to respond to it. I know that you have this fashion for transhumanism, but I can't even begin.
Yeah, I think that touches on a lot of the subconscious death anxiety, which drives so much of this tyrannical impulse that we see rearing up again in humanity. Let's take a break. We're with Jeffrey Tucker. He's the editorial director at AIER.org. That's AIER.org, where you can find his columns and many others dealing with the facts of this lockdown madness and how it hopefully will be defeated once and for all. Hopefully this never has to happen again, but you never know. These tyrants are tricky and they're very persistent with our money. Back in a second.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
In a fight for the soul of human civilization itself, A Neighbor's Choice returns, and we're here with our friend Jeffrey Tucker. And Luke, a commenter, just said such a great interview with Jeffrey Tucker, and I have to agree, it's always great having you to talk to you. It's been too long, and we're going to have to do this more often, Jeff, if you don't mind, because it's lots to think about, and you're one of those guys that likes to think in multiple disciplines and kind of integrate it together in a big picture view. So, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you guys just have a video censored by the illustrious publisher YouTube?
Well, it was complicated, but YouTube itself said that it was our video, which is hilarious to me because they're supposed to be the experts. It was not our video. It was a Florida television station. We wrote an article about it and embedded it. But it was our embed that alerted YouTube to its existence. So the YouTube spokesman said AIR's video. It was not our video. I mean, I wished it was, but it wasn't. And what was very revealing because it shows that YouTube, it's censorship. They're not going to censor you if nobody's looking at your video. But once a big forum posts it, and ours is a big forum, then they get interested, and then that's when they censor. So it's a funny form of censorship. It's like you can post anything you want, so long as say anything you want, so long as nobody's listening. But the second that people start getting interested in what you have to say, that's when YouTube flies into action. So YouTube actually took down a video with the Florida governor. With a roundtable of epidemiologists from Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford University. Wow. Yeah. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was just an incredible act. And DeSantis was just heroic about it. He just said, oh, yeah, I'll hold another one. So he held another one yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're about to post it tomorrow. We'll see if YouTube takes that one down, too. I don't know. It's become a game and a little bit absurd. And now, we're in this funny situation where you've got these tech giants that all of us rely on, Google, which owns YouTube, Facebook, I hate to even say that name because I hate that platform so much, and Twitter, and Amazon, and we all depend on them for our music, for our books, for watching videos and everything. But now you have anybody who's not a complete Biden loyalist actually extremely doubtful about whether and to what extent they should have this kind of power and determined to do something about it. So they're setting themselves up for disaster, political disaster, really.
Right. It's interesting. In a future episode, we can get into whether this social media cartel is really a failure of capitalism or something else. I want to get into that with you at some point because that's a big topic of discussion.
It is a huge topic, and it's something I've not really written about, but I tell you this, that, the normal libertarian heuristic of dividing society between the state and the market is theoretically helpful, but not very operational in our times since the blurring has become quite intense. I mean, it's clear the state has outsourced its
book burning. It's book burning.
Yeah, to tech companies, and they go along with them.
Yeah.
So why, I think there you're going to get to your political explanations. Actually, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, very good. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I know a lot of our commenters here are commenting how much they've enjoyed this discussion, and I want to tell people to check out your book, Liberty or Lockdown, by Jeffrey Tucker, and anything else you'd like to point to in this moment.
Well, if you like Twitter, I'm as long as they tolerate me, I'm at Jeffrey A. Tucker. So glad to welcome.
Well, very good, and hope to see you in Florida sometime. This is the new headquarters of Liberty, apparently. So let's make it. Let's make it happen.
You're right. All the best. Thanks so much for having me.
Very good. Thanks for coming on. And that's it for today's edition of A Neighbor's Choice, folks. I've appreciated your time with us. I've enjoyed this discussion. I hope you have as well. And this is what it's all about. We have to fight for liberty. We have to challenge the culture of fear, the culture of hate, the culture of groupthink, and build the kind of Renaissance society that our children and grandchildren deserve. It's up to us to do that. This is the time to do it. Don't wait for other people to be your hero. We have to do it.
Talk and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's